Hello. So I'm glad to introduce to Dr. Kutoma Wakunuma, one of our keynote speakers. She's a researcher and academic known for her work in the field of information and communication technology, ethics. Her research interest and expertise primarily focus on the ethical implications of technology on modern society, including both the global north and the global south. Dr. Wakunuma examines issues such as the social, ethical, and policy implications of emerging technologies, including but not limited to artificial intelligence and digital inclusion. She has contributed significantly to understanding how technology impacts society, particularly in areas related to digital ethics, responsible innovation, and the interplay between technology and human rights. And Wakunuma's work often involves analyzing the consequences of technology deployment and advising on responsible and ethical approaches to technology development and policy. Her role as an academic and researcher includes teaching, conducting research, publishing papers, and participating in various conferences and workshops related to her areas of expertise. So I am so glad to welcome Kutoma. Thank you. Please be welcome.
Thank you so much for allowing me to present at this later hour. Apparently, I was supposed to have presented a lot earlier, but I got confused with the timings. So I do apologize for that, and I'm really thankful that I'm able to present today. So I didn't hear what Ingrid said, but I assume she made all the necessary introduction. So I'll just delve into the presentation. So I am going to be talking about AI and the politics of power. And I'm going to be doing this with respect to implications for society and space. I talk about space because I am not an architect. So I'm looking at space, I'm looking at architecture from the point of view of space, from the point of view of the environment. So really what I'm here to do is to talk about the social and ethical implications of artificial intelligence in how we use it, particularly when we're looking at our ecosystem, our environment, and indeed our space. So I will touch on everyday AI and then come to AI and architecture and what that means when we're talking about space. Then I'll touch on the ethical concerns, on politics with respect to power, people, and space, and then I will conclude. I did notice that a couple of presenters did talk about some ethical concerns, but I suppose, we cannot touch on these particular aspects because they're quite important when it comes to artificial intelligence and its use in society. So I will begin by reading out this quote from Stuart Russell, who is the founder of the Center for Intelligence Systems at the University of California. I found this quote quite poignant, particularly in terms of how we might look at or use artificial intelligence in our everyday lives. And this quote is very important because I think there's a question sometimes around how AI might actually be a lot more intelligent than we humans who actually have created artificial intelligence. So the quote goes like this: everything we have of value as human beings is the result of our intelligence. What AI could do is essentially be a power tool that magnifies human intelligence and gives us the ability to move our civilization forward. It might be curing disease, it might be eliminating poverty, certainly it should include preventing environmental catastrophe. And of course, we can use AI, and are indeed using AI in a lot of other different domain areas. And this shows how perverse or indeed ubiquitous artificial intelligence has actually become in society. So we see that we are leveraging a lot of our computer power in our daily lives. So, for example, when we're doing our daily chores or indeed going about our daily lives. And so these illustrations are actually are generated by ChatGPT. So I thought, I might as well use it whilst talking about artificial intelligence. So one of the illustrations is one that is depicting a woman shopping at a grocery store. And this represents how we're living our daily lives every day and how AI has actually permeated our day-to-day work, our day-to-day lives. So we meet all these artificial intelligence systems. So, for example, when we go shopping, we meet with AI systems that kind of prompt us to do certain things like, whether we're paying by cash, whether we're paying by credit card, or whether we have put the shopping basket at a different angle or in a different section, and how we're going to move this. And all this, there is a lot of data that is collected. So we'll come to that at a later point. We also see the use of artificial intelligence in healthcare, for example, where we see a lot of robots that are doing a lot of healthcare activities. So, for example, surgery and different other elements related to healthcare. We are also seeing a lot of artificial intelligence through robotics in assembly lines. And this, of course, helps us to optimize work so that the work becomes a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. And then, of course, it generates a lot of profit, or at least much more profit than if humans were actually were involved in the assembly of these technologies. Rather, this assembling of these cars, for example, or these works that are needed to be done. And so, and for the most part, AI is actually being very much in our daily lives in more developed countries. But I think the same is happening in the developing world. So I thought I would be remiss if I didn't actually mention the developing world in this particular presentation, because obviously we need to be discussing AI and architecture from a global perspective as something that perhaps is not necessarily being done at the moment. So we are seeing the use of artificial intelligence in developing countries. So, for example, these illustrations are looking at the introduction of AI in very important sectors. So, for example, the sector of agriculture, where, as this illustration here demonstrates, we are seeing artificial intelligence being used in agriculture. So here we can see that there's a use of drones just to enhance crop viability. We can see that there are intelligent systems that are being used to, for example, look at soil viability, rainfall casting, and also perhaps soil viability as well, or indeed weather patterns. We can also see the use of AI in healthcare, and one of its uses has been in Rwanda, particularly during the COVID pandemic, where robotics were introduced to be a bridge between those that were infected with COVID and then the healthcare practitioners. So that way, there was the avoidance of unnecessary contamination for those that were already healthy and those that had the disease. And then we can also see artificial intelligence being used in education, as this illustration shows us. So basically, we are seeing that artificial intelligence can be used, or indeed is being used for such good, as the UN Secretary General once suggested back in 2017. And then when it comes to artificial intelligence and architecture, this illustration, which is an illustration that is showing some futuristic landscape where I seamlessly integrated into architecture. We see this aesthetic pleasing illustration where there is a lot of intelligent systems that have been integrated in this particular architecture work. And this is very interesting, and it can be quite pleasing, particularly for the environment and also for the citizens of that particular imagined space. So we can see that within that illustration, or indeed within architecture as a whole, there is this shift to more intelligent, efficient, and adaptive environments as a result of AI. There is, as indicated before, the enhanced aesthetics and functional aspects of architecture. But then the most interesting thing for me, I think, is the ability to address broader societal challenges such as sustainability, because we know that climate change, for example, is a very important particular aspect. And so we need to look at how we can leverage artificial intelligence to be able to sustain our environments, particularly when it comes to climate change, for example. Then, of course, there's the aspects of accessibility and the general evolving needs of the populations, which can actually be used because of the large data sets that are realized from artificial intelligence, and this can be done through architecture. So here, I think somebody mentioned, the use of design optimization, for example, predictive analysis through in architecture through artificial intelligence. But then there's also this aspect of heritage preservation, where AI tools can actually help in preservation and restoration of historic buildings, for example, by analyzing patterns and predicting potential structure failures. We can also then look at the environment, particularly when it comes to AI being instrumental in designing buildings that are more sustainable and have lower environmental footprints. The other thing that really comes to mind when we're looking at artificial intelligence in architecture is smart buildings, or indeed the building of smart cities. And this is, of course, because we have this use of technologies such as Internet of Things, the seamless integration of various other different intelligent systems within architecture, or indeed within environments and within the spaces that we inhabit. So we see that there are advantages, particularly when you're looking at the smart cities as an example, because we note that the integration of sensors and resulting big data is actually creating new opportunities for the design and management of our spaces and environments. We can see that there is this enhancement of creativity and sustainability, but also the improvement of functionality of space, because we are using these big data sets that can be analyzed to actually predict patterns that are going to be useful for the inhabitants of these particular spaces where architecture is being done. So Ortega Fernandez does state that the transformation in how society uses physical space is evident through the contribution to better infrastructure, management of transportation, for example, and indeed public services that can lead to more efficient and sustainable use of spaces because of artificial intelligence. So these are really great examples of what we can achieve through use of AI in architecture. But with advantages, of course, come social and ethical concerns, which I am very much interested in. And so we need to start asking critical questions around, as I intimated at the start of this presentation, around the politics of power, people, and indeed space. And I think one of these aspects, when we are looking at smart cities, for example, is that there is this alteration of the conventional norms as we have known them through the traditional ways that we have been living within our spaces and within our environments. So before the introduction of artificial intelligence, and I'm not saying that there wasn't concern around social and ethical issues, but I think they are more exacerbated in this arena because of using artificial intelligence. So here we're thinking about the alteration of what privacy means, or indeed what security means, because of the vast amounts of data that are being collected. And then, of course, what that means for ownership, and how we can look at what community means for ourselves, indeed for the people that these the design of these new buildings that are using artificial intelligence means. And this is where this aspect of personal and the political comes in. And this is an old phrase, the personal is a political, from I think 1960s, 70s feminist movement, but it still resonates to this day when we're looking at how changes are being made in terms of privacy, in terms of security, in terms of control and ownership when it comes to the vast amounts of data that are being collected as a result of artificial intelligence. This is because the collection of this data is not by the citizens themselves. As the citizens are using the services that are resulting from artificial intelligence, there is the need or the element of personal data that is being collected. And that juxtaposition is where the personal and the political comes in, because there's need to understand what the authorities, for example, who are collecting that data, are actually doing with the data that they collect. And often people, as they go about doing their everyday lives through this new realm of artificial intelligence, are not necessarily, some of them are not necessarily aware of how the data that is being presented is used. And so this is why we need to start looking at how responsible AI can look like in architecture or in the spaces that we create through use of AI. Let me just check. Okay. Right, okay, so it was a message from me, because I'm not sure that I can hear anybody else. Right. So then when it comes to politics of people and space, particularly with regards to developing countries, we see that at a global level, the conversation around space, around use of artificial intelligence in developing much more nuanced spaces or acceptable spaces that can actually lead to easy lives, for example, or better designs and buildings, is not necessarily there when we're looking at it from a global South perspective. And I think this is a shame, because the implications of not having different voices at the table when we're discussing AI in architecture or environment or in space is something that can be disadvantageous, because implications or issues that are happening in the global South can actually be transferred to the global North. And so learning from each other, exchanging knowledge, or having mutual understanding about what is happening architecture-wise in developing countries and also in more developed countries is quite an important one. So, for example, when we're looking at what is happening in developing countries as a result, I think, of climate change, we see that sometimes there are issues around flooding of homes. And sometimes this is obviously because of nature, because of the changing climate, but also sometimes it's to do with issues that have not necessarily been looked at properly when designing this particular building. So, for example, we have drainage issues, we have transportation issues, where we can have a lot of gridlocks within these particular environments. And sometimes this is because politicians perhaps try to appease the masses, and so they do not necessarily want to do the boss, and they allow people to design these spaces any way they want. And this has undesirable consequences. So, for example, they can have an impact on the environment, on health, and indeed on minority and vulnerable groups, such as, for example, women who, for the most part, actually look after these homes or these spaces. And that is where the issue of policies of people and space comes in, and something that it needs to be looked at when we're looking at architecture when it comes to developing countries. So then we have these issues around politics of power. We do know, I think most of us know, that technology is not neutral. And because it's not neutral, there is the politics of power in there. And this is, for example, through perhaps a provision of software, provision of hardware, and indeed network connections. All these have to do with power. And this power lies in the people that actually do provide these particular elements. So, for example, we can look at technology giants where they have near monopoly, and in the AI field, because they are the ones that actually provide AI platforms. And so because of this, we can see that there is this reliance and this dependency on technology giants. And this perhaps may not necessarily be such a good idea, because if power is concentrated in a few hands, it can be very disadvantageous for those that do not necessarily have that particular power. And because of that, it leaves very little room for local innovation and indeed for competition, because that is something that is needed in order to enhance a fair distribution of competition, or indeed of innovation in various emerging technologies. And so questions of data and control comes in, which I think I've alluded to earlier. And this exertion of control is found in inequalities and creation of further digital divides, because without control, with little control, those that do not have that particular control further become marginalized. And as a result, there could be an AI digital divide that can be exacerbated. And then, of course, there are threats to jobs. So remember when I was giving that illustration of the assembly line, or indeed the introduction of AI in healthcare, behind that introduction of robots on the assembly lines, or indeed the introduction of AI systems as we go on doing our daily chores, or indeed our daily shopping, for example, potentially there is a loss of jobs, because there is that replacement of people with machines, and that can be disadvantageous for society in certain ways, because we need them to have reskilling, and sometimes not everyone can be able to upgrade their skills. And then, of course, there is the aspect of discriminating algorithms. And we have mostly heard sometimes about gender bias in the large language models, where there's this stereotyping of gender issues, where women are still seen in a very stereotypical sense, and men are seen in a much more superior aspect. And of course, there is this aspect of social sorting. We have heard of stories of the use of AI for policing, and this policing sometimes can be done in a way that can be, I suppose, demeaning, for lack of a better word, for some people in lower, say, brackets, or lower spaces that are not necessarily, seen in a good light. So that in itself can be disadvantageous, and it speaks to the politics of power as well. Thank you. So then, of course, I'll briefly touch on privacy and data security, the digital divide, which I've already looked at. And then, of course, there's this increased surveillance and tracking of citizens. And then we have this significant digital footprint that is resulting from AI. And then, of course, there is this control or lack of control over citizens' data by the citizens themselves. And so we begin to see this imbalance in the use of AI. So we see the imbalance in data, the imbalance in research and development. So, for example, we are now talking about AI in architecture, but we do not necessarily see a lot of this discussion or this research in, say, for example, some less developed countries. And so there is this imbalance that continues when it comes to computing resources, or indeed when it comes to technology transfer and intellectual property. And that can have a disadvantaging effect. And then we can see aspects of culture and ethical biases as well. So when we're talking about responsible AI, because this is something that is very important, we must be able to look at AI in architecture in a responsible way, particularly when we're looking at the design, the development and implementation, and then also in terms of the systems that we adopt and use in the spaces and indeed in our environments. So here we should be considering things around inclusion, who is included in the design processes, in the development process, in the implementation processes, and then who is being engaged. Then we ought to be also open to different voices and experiences in the spaces that we inhabit. And one of these ways is to look at robust AI regulation policies to protect citizens, particularly when we are looking at the integration of smart technologies in architecture and indeed in the spaces and environments that will now become the new normal as we begin to use vast amounts of data as a result of artificial intelligence.
So, Kutoma, thank you very much, but we don't have actually more time, and we'll be happy to if you could read out also.
You please explain further, Ubuntu, in relation to AI. What are the problems that Africa issues in the design of AI? Okay, that's a very interesting question. So I think Ubuntu can actually work very well in relation to AI, particularly from a Global South perspective. But I think also this is something that the Global North can actually learn as well. So Ubuntu means I am because you are. So this is basically a community element where communities lift each other and come together to find solutions for challenges that beset their societies. So, for example, when we're talking about AI in Africa, because we do not necessarily have a lot of, there isn't a lot of funding and indeed not a lot of technology that goes around for these particular communities, we see that when people come together as a collective, particularly communities, they can then decide together how they want to manage, for example, if they're going to have smart cities, what they intend to have in those smart cities that can actually benefit everybody else in that community. So it is not really about being individualistic, but it is about understanding the greater good or the greater needs of society. And I think this is something that, as I indicated, the Global North can actually learn from, because we need to understand, we need to engage, and we need to add different voices to the processes of how we develop our spaces, how we develop our environments as we use AI. So understand the people's needs, understand how the people can be impacted by artificial intelligence. So I hope I've answered this question. I don't know if there's another question from the floor, or maybe something that is going to reflect to you. And another one is, do you see a risk where inclusion in AI only goes skin deep in, for example, the image generation models that are broadly publicly visible, while perhaps more invisible models are ignored? That's an interesting question. But I think, yeah, there could be that risk, particularly when the risk is not really, when the inclusion is not necessarily being a genuine. Sometimes inclusion can be just a box ticking exercise. We must be able to genuinely have inclusion that is meaningful, that adds value to how we can apply and use artificial intelligence in society. And if we do not do that, then yeah, of course, there is that risk that can result. Absolutely. So I hope I've answered that question. Is
there any other question from the audience? So thank you very much, Kutoma. It has been a true pleasure to listen to you. And I hope in the future, AI developers and the rest of society can take into consideration.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, so that we all consider both global north and global south in the development of the future of AI. So thank you very much. And yeah, it's been a pleasure listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.